So welcome everybody. This is our first CatchMark Technology Cybersecurity podcast, and I've just made Brian feel very comfortable because I screwed something up, and we're still alive and still kicking. So I asked him, he's a little nervous when we first started talking about doing this. I said, "What's the worst that can happen?" You just saw it, Brian.
Yeah,
we're on camera talking and no sound. So our goal with this cybersecurity podcast is really, our main goals with CatchMark is to solve problems and to help people. And this is a way that I think we can do both of those things and give back and just give some tips and some things that people can think about, whether you're a small business owner, medium business owner, or even if you're just wondering what you need to do with cybersecurity at home. And so that's what we're trying to do with this podcast. And so each week we're going to bring you some different topics and some different tips and some different things. And we're just going to kind of talk through it. We might have a guest. We might not. It might just be the two of us.
Yep.
That's going to be kind of how we go. But before we get going, I want to introduce Brian and give him a chance to just kind of talk a little bit about how he got into the field, what he likes about cybersecurity and whatnot. So Brian, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So I transitioned into the tech field in the mid 2000s, moved over to Detroit area, took a job with the Department of Defense, was doing IT help desk support. And as part of my role, I was doing some of the functions of a cybersecurity program. Moved from that position into an auditing office, where that was exciting. We'd go out across the U.S. and different arsenals and depots and look at their cybersecurity.
What's an arsenal or a depot?
Well, it's where we're...
I know, but for those people listening out there, what?
Yeah, so arsenals and depots are outlying posts where, you're going to have equipment, vehicles, IT systems to support the Department of Defense's programs. And so we would go out to those different areas and evaluate their IT systems. And the DoD has a rigorous cybersecurity framework, sets of rules and standards need to meet, and we'd go out and audit them. From there, I trained. Go ahead.
Where was your favorite place to go?
Sierra.
Or the most interesting?
Sierra. I
Sierra,
went to
really?
Sierra, yeah, Sierra in California, and multiple trips there. It's like walking out on the moon.
What's there? Can't you talk about it?
Yeah, we're not supposed to talk about it. No pictures, no cameras. Yeah,
he'd tell you, but he'd have to kill you.
That's right.
So okay, keep going. Sorry.
And so then I transitioned into a role where I worked with a fabulous team who provided hosting services and was in charge of taking care of the cybersecurity for that team every step along the way and becoming a system owner. So I went from auditing to actually being the one that was responsible. And then my last couple of years with the DoD were spent working with a program executive office and working on weapons platforms. And that was a different part of cybersecurity I'd never experienced, and it was exciting and fun. And
it's funny because I know the back I know the back end of all this, but like if I'm a layman out there listening, I'm like, that is so awesome when you say weapons systems. Like,
yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. There's some cool stuff to it and some cool parts to it. So Brian grew up here.
Yep.
Right. Whitehall grad.
Yep.
Local hometown guy. We love to bring the hometown folks back and bring that talent back into town. Attended Western Michigan University.
Yep. 93.
In 90.
Graduated here and then...
93 at Whitehall, not 93 from Western.
No, and then 2000 out of Western. Yep.
So you were on the 10-year plan.
It took me a little bit.
I was on that plan as well. So, and then I'm Brent Raeth. I am the managing partner of CatchMark Technologies. I've been a technologist, whatever that means, for probably more than 20 years now. My actual background or my specialty, if I had one, I don't like to pigeonhole myself like that, but would be cybersecurity. That's what my undergrad is in, and also what I've done quite a bit of. I also worked for the Detroit Arsenal for a long time in the Department of Defense across different organizations, and worked with Brian on that side of the state, and then abandoned him to fend for himself there. Again, he did a phenomenal job. But I would say Brian and I are probably the two experts in our organization in regards to cybersecurity. Yeah. And I try to stay as hands-off as possible and just let Brian run our cybersecurity program for our customers and just lend experience and help in any way that I can. Today, our topic is, Brian, what's our topic?
What is cybersecurity and why is it important to your business?
All right. So I think when people talk about cybersecurity, they got no idea what they're talking about. they're scared, confused. They just don't really know what to do. And I'll tell you a funny story. My dad passed away about a little more than a year ago, but probably 6 months before he passed away, I showed up at my mom and dad's house to just talk to him, and my mom's just shaking her head when I walk in, and I'm like, what? And she's like, he's on the phone. And I'm like, who's he talking to? And he's just fired up. He's like,
Doug fired up.
Doug fired up. I know it's hard to believe, but he is just fired up and going crazy in the other room. I'm like, who is he talking to? And he's like, my mom goes, I don't know the guy's name, but he said he was from Microsoft.
Oh boy.
And so he wasn't from Microsoft. Microsoft will never call you. Let's start that today. But my dad knew this because I talked to him many times about this. And he wanted to let the guy on the other end of the line know that he knew he wasn't from Microsoft. So I said, how long's he been at it? She said an hour. Yeah, I'm like, why are you wasting an hour of your day? But stuff like that happens to people all the time. There is a misconception about what cybersecurity is. So in your own words, Brian, what's cybersecurity in layman's terms?
Yeah, from a high level, it's protection of your data, right? From a business standpoint, we talk about with cybersecurity, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So making sure that only the right people have access to that data is trustworthy and accurate, and then it's available when needed. And so again, high level cybersecurity, but it does fall down to, and that trickles out, right? So like you said, your dad, I mean, I remember putting something on Facebook to sell in a marketplace, and I look at my wife, that's odd. I got to hit right away. And the guy wants to, I'm gonna pay you in cash. Is that good? Yeah. And I'm going to text you a code and you text it back to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you the money. Right. And so again, we'll get into some podcasts later, talk about multi-factor authentication, but the tricks in the social engineering part are a big part of what we see today in across businesses and in personal lives. And they're trying to steal your data, trying to get to it.
I would say my definition, and I always try to, I'm a dumb guy, so I'm simple. Are your doors and windows shut and locked? Right? I mean, that whether that's your home or your business, do you have a checklist, and are your doors and windows shut and locked? And a little more complicated than that because you don't really know how to shut and lock your doors and windows for the average person. But again, cybersecurity is bigger than just the technical piece. I think a lot of people, and for me, I think that's important to get out there. A lot of people think, oh, I bought this widget and it's going to protect me from everything. And it's not. It's your doors and windows, and those doors and windows consist of people, processes, and technology, and policies. And so there's a lot of boring stuff in there too. Like I've interviewed, a lot of people over the years, and lately, the last probably 2 or 3 years, everybody's like, all the kids coming out of college are like, I want to be in cybersecurity. They think it's Mr. Robot. Yeah. And it's not. It's just there's a little tiny small sliver of it. It's Mr. Robot, but most of it is common sense and simple stuff. So so I think that's, for me, that's how I kind of define it. It's a little bit different going from the DoD to, let's say, small and medium business. So you talked a little bit about the Department of Defense, very rigid frameworks. They've got this kind of stuff. They might not always execute it well, but they've got a process in place for how this is supposed to be done. And you get into a small business and they're not sure what to do. So tell me a little bit about transitioning from kind of that DoD rigid framework and how you take some of those same concepts, Brian, and you put those into play for a small business. I mean, what are the things you focus on?
So earlier I had mentioned frameworks, and all frameworks are guidelines, right? And there's multiple organizations that provide you those guidelines, and we talked about the DoD being very rigorous, but those same principles, overall principles, how you manage accounts, how do you protect your data? Are you backing it up? Well, how do you manage who has access to that data? What kind of protections, like you said, the windows and the doors on the outside of the network piece, but also
for real.
I mean, so you talked about technical, but over the years we've gotten better at protecting the technical side of cybersecurity, and criminals will find the easiest way in, right? So if they come to your house and you've got the cameras and the dogs barking, they're going to skip. They're going to go to the next. They're going to easy one, right? Show me the place that's dark. Maybe an unlocked window I can slip into.
Unlit.
So today we see it's the human element, right? And so training, just having cybersecurity training as a part of a program is important to get to your users. And there's a variety of different ways we do that and help support our customers.
That's awesome. So what is, looking at, so we're talking about what cybersecurity is. Mm-hmm. What isn't cybersecurity? You know what I mean? Like, so you hear people say all the time, like, well, this is what cybersecurity is. This is what is it not? And for me, it's often not what people actually think it is. And what I mean by that, Brian's like, where are you going with this? He's like, I am not following. What I mean is they think it's Mr. Robot. They think I've got to have the best firewall, or I got to have the best piece of software, or this software vendor or this hardware manufacturer told me I'm secure. And that's not, it's a small portion of it, but it's not what cybersecurity is about. It's about ensuring that you're doing the right things across your organization.
Yeah, and we always talk about it's a culture change, right?
Yeah.
And again, I think that's the scary piece is it's so, like, you can make this big and huge, right? And so we always, scary. Yeah, and so what we do is we try to tackle an inch forward every day, get
Small
a little better,
things.
get a little better, and it's a cultural change. And as you'd mentioned, it's not just the technology. You don't just put it in place and just ignore it, right? You've got to have somebody that's monitoring those systems you have in place, and then growing in the other areas so we always start out with a gap assessment, right? We go in and we figure out where are the vulnerabilities, where do they lie, and then make a plan to fix them and prioritize those, right? And that's where we help customers to lay out that plan for them and help them move an inch at a time to get a little better.
So one of the big things I think also is this stuff costs money too, right? So you're going in, you're doing a gap assessment, and you're saying, hey, this is what you need to do to move forward. Let's say you do a gap assessment and they need to move it all forward. It's just all, for lack of a better word, a crap show, right?
Yeah.
What are the things that you prioritize? So they've got $5,000 for the whole year to spend on cyber. Where does Brian go? Like what if it's your business, what do you focus on?
So we always take a look at impact and likelihood for that organization, and we assign risk. And so based on a vulnerability that we may have found in a gap assessment, we'll take the likelihood, how likely is that event to happen, and then what's the impact to the organization, and we rank it high, medium, low. And then what we'll do is we'll go back and we'll say, okay, here's your dollar amount, here's your spend. Let's figure out the highest priority and get you the best.
So typical IT guy response, it depends.
It depends. Yeah.
So if I'm paraphrasing that, you're basically looking at the organization and saying, here's your biggest window open.
Yep.
Here's your you've left your back door open.
Yep.
That's what you prioritize.
Yep.
Not like, hey, these are things that you need to think about, like, because you got a back door open. It doesn't matter if you do those other things, your back door is wide open, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit to, maybe using the home strategy, we get this a lot because we're also a managed service provider, so we provide tech support.
Yep.
My tech guys are taking care of cyber. I've heard that 100 times. Talk a little bit to that.
So your tech support staff is going to put the framework, let's say, in place for the home, right? They're going to stand up some studs. They're going to, build some walls.
So it's going to be you bumped your mic again. Yeah, I know. It's going to be contractor grade.
Yeah.
They're going to put locks on the doors and windows, but they're not going to do what? They're not going to
give you those extra pieces to watch out for all of they're not staying on top of the current threats in the environment.
So no, if I'm using the house analogy, they're not going to have break glass sensors. They're not going to have camera systems. They're not going to have entry control systems. They're not going to post. You're not going to give you a guard dog. They're not going to post a guard at the front. They're not putting a fence in for you. All those things. So that's kind of the answer.
They're giving you a spec home, right?
They're giving you a spec home.
They're just going to give you the basics to and from a technology standpoint,
that's not their job.
Exactly.
In a sense, right?
Right. Yeah. They're going to do the things from a technology standpoint that are going to support some of these areas, but it's not the next level, right? And that's where
you come in.
Yeah, that's where we come in.
Okay, really, really good. What do you think? what's the hardest thing for organizations to do when talking cybersecurity? So you're going into a new small business and you're like, you got to do these things. And the one thing that they struggle the most with.
I'd say is just, again, it's a cultural change, right? And getting buy-in across the organization and just, again, repetition through doing these, we're going to write policies and plans and give you the roadmap, and just filtering that down throughout your organization and changing the culture is probably the biggest lift.
So when you say that, what do you mean? I'm going to press you a little bit on this. Like, what does changing the culture mean? Can you give me some examples or some specifics around that?
Yeah. So thinking about some of our customers, one of the big things we see right now is phishing, right?
Yep.
In understanding that when you're in your inbox, right, these criminals are trying to steal your identity, your credentials. They're going to use that to, log into your email and hijack it. And they're, again, looking to steal data, right? So it could be financial data for the company. It could be some proprietary secrets. In just getting that understanding across your employee base that with the training,
things are going to change.
Things are going to change, right? And it's something that you have to take serious because everybody is a part of the effort.
Right. If one person screws up,
one person. Yeah.
Yep. The whole chain dissolves. I mean, things that I can think of right off the top of my head are, most organizations, everybody has administrator privileges. You can install whatever software wherever and whenever you want.
And it's for
that's a culture
ease of
change.
Doing business.
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And
it is.
Business owners come back to revenue, right? And that's the part about cybersecurity that's a little tricky is there's no immediate, I can't see implementing cybersecurity and I get revenue on the other end of it up front. But
right.
You find out when you are under an attack or you get attacked, right? And
it's a little weird.
It is.
It is. I've always said that I'm never, as a cybersecurity professional, you're never making things easier for people. And that's a tough job to have because you're not, right? So you take a small business where they've got 5 employees and all 5 of those employees have a laptop, let's say, and they're all used to installing whatever they want. That makes business easy for them. They don't. And Brian comes in and says, look, we need to limit this because people could install software that have vulnerabilities that we can't track and manage, and that could leave your business at risk. You would not believe how much pushback you get because somebody can't install a piece of software. Passwords. Yeah. I remember going into an organization and talking to the owner, and the owner was just confident that, I said, all your passwords need to be complex. And he's like, we'll push this out. And I'm like, I've had experience with this, right? Like, this is going to be a huge culture change for your people because they're used to 1, 2, 3, 4 ABCD, right? And now you're pushing this out, and sure enough, man, that he says, no, I'll put it in place. I want it to go tomorrow. Yep. And we did it, and I told him we shouldn't, and he did it anyways. And it was a zoo. We spent all day there because people couldn't log in. They locked their accounts out. They couldn't get the password right. They didn't read that's culture change, right? Yeah. I mean, and a person that came from an organization that usually has a good cybersecurity program because that stuff's just common sense and easy for them now because they've been through that change already. They've experienced it, you know? So what is it that you love about cybersecurity, Brian?
It's a daily challenge. Things are always changing, and you're always trying to keep up with the latest, threats that are, evolving and different attacks that you see our customers experience, and just staying on the growing edge of where cyber criminals are going to try to get to your data.
Keep ahead of them.
Yeah, try to stay ahead of them. What's
the craziest thing with no names? What's the craziest thing you've seen happen? I got a couple stories, but I want you to go first.
Yeah, I would say in my time with the DoD, I didn't see as many crazy things as I've seen now that I'm out here. And really for me out here, it just comes back to the constant phishing campaigns that are run and
how clever they are.
Clever. Yeah. We see where they're, it's not just some random name anymore. It's coming from a known person.
Yeah, Brian sending me an email with his signature block.
Yeah, click on this invoice and improve it for me, will you? And it's all it takes. And so those are the things that I see that are probably the craziest right now.
So we had a customer, and we just basically consulted on this because they were through a couple people we knew relationally, business relationships. they got ransomware, and it took their entire business down. And they very quickly went back through and found out that not only cybersecurity wise were they in a bad place, but tech management maturity, which is a whole conversation Jeff could get into on the other podcast, they were not in a good place because they didn't have backups and they didn't have things set up, so they couldn't recover. And so as we kind of helped them through some of this stuff and probed, what we found was that this malicious actor had been in their network for 6 or 7 months, stealing data. And on their way out, ransomwared them. And it took, he had the little steps that he had for backups, they had undone because he was, so they disabled backups. They made sure they failed. They did all these things in prep work so that when they stole their data, but when they ransomware, they knew they were going to have no choice but to pay the ransom.
And one of the things that we see, and we'll get into conversations in the future about cybersecurity insurance, is if, just simply, again, the thought process, where do you store that? Well, we're so digital now in electronics, but if that's in that network somewhere and that cyber criminal finds that document and understands what the insurance is going to cover, they're going to come back and they're going to ask you for that amount, right? And then I've heard this, I've talked about crazy stories. I've seen this where you pay the ransom. They didn't get it. What do you mean you didn't get it? Paid? No, we didn't get it. Somebody stole it from us. You need to pay it again. Right. So even though you pay the ransom, there's no guarantee that you're going to get. There
is no guarantee. They're pretty good about paying. That is one of the craziest parts about ransomware, is that for the most part they do pay.
They do, yeah.
They do unlock once you pay. And it's because otherwise nobody's going to pay. They're like, why am I going to? The ransoms have gotten so high now that it's gotten a little ridiculous. I think people are a little less likely. But yeah, that's scary. So to kind of twist it back to doors and windows, and we're kind of scaring the crap out of people right now, but just some advice for small business owners, like maybe 3 things that you're like, hey, ask these questions, or make sure you're pushing in this way. So for example, you mentioned cybersecurity insurance, but what are 2 or 3 things that they absolutely need to make sure they understand, or they know, or they're working on?
Yeah, the biggest things right now, obviously you said cybersecurity insurance, one of them, multi-factor authentication.
Okay.
And again, that's where, it's not simply enough nowadays to have a username and password, because again, through a phishing attempt that may get compromised.
Yep.
Having that extra piece of authentication. So a text to you, we use a lot of apps here, right, on our phone. So an extra code being pushed to your phone that you enter on top of your username and password, that's important. And then just, again, training, right? And training your users on how to identify. Again, I've talked about how users are. So
if you had $5,000 and that's all you had to spend, and you could pick one thing, it'd be user training. Am I hearing you right?
I would say user training right now in simulating phishing attacks, and there's things that we have that can do that, and that simulation builds repetition on recognizing and practicing and failing safely and understanding why you failed, so that you get.
That's a good way to put it. Failing safely. That is a really good way to put it. Make the mistake in practice rather than in the game. Kind of idea.
Exactly.
Okay, so multi-factor authentication, training. What was the other one you said?
We started out with cybersecurity insurance.
Cybersecurity insurance.
And a part of that, right? And cybersecurity insurance is not just as easy as I'll go out and get it. Right.
Right. Because a lot of people aren't even insuring you anymore. Like
So you talked about, as we talk about the increase in criminal activity, insurance companies have paid out a lot of money on these claims, and they're like, hey, we're just not cutting you a policy anymore. There's things you've got to have in place. And we see customers go through this where they want to sign up for insurance. They get a check. They get a list back of all these things need to be done before we.
Which is your framework, or your doors.
Which is your starting point.
Lock these doors and windows and get a guard dog.
Yeah, they're not.
And they're like, oh crap, I have to spend money on this.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Yeah. That.
Insurance companies are gauging their risk as well as when we insure you.
Yeah, because they're in the business to make money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I mean, I know we've seen an uptick in customers asking about, hey, can we review those? What does this mean? I've also seen customers who go and they get that back and they say yes to all of it. Yeah, we do all this. What happens in that situation, Brian? Like something does happen.
Yeah. So if you ever are, check yes on all the boxes, and there's an attack, and ransomware attack on your organization.
And you said you're doing vulnerability management.
They're going to check. They're going to do their due diligence. They're going to say, where's your continuity plan? And you said you did user training. Can you provide us proof, right? And if you can't do those things, you run the risk of not getting your claim.
They're not going to pay your claim.
Not gonna pay your claim.
I read a stat, and I can't remember it but it's something like 65% of small businesses go under after a significant cybersecurity attack. So whether that's ransomware or something like that, the company I had referenced, without any names or identities, they stayed in business, but they couldn't do business for like 2 weeks. Yeah. 2 straight weeks they were done.
Yeah.
And if luckily they had some capital and they had some cash that they could do stuff with, but you could lose 80, 90, 100 grand, and for a small business you might not ever recover from that. No, you know what I mean? And on the flip side of that, as a service provider, as a service provider, and then also as a consumer, you need to be taking care of your customers' data, because they're a lot of times you're collecting information about them, and they're trusting you, and there's a trust relationship between you and that vendor. And that's the other thing. I've seen that a lot. Small businesses that process credit cards, or retail shops that they have a rewards program that they take your data down and they do stuff. And, they want to get business done, but sometimes you owe that to your customer to make sure that that's being protected in the correct way. What do you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, small businesses, I think, feel sometimes that the stuff that they're doing is not important, but that's where we see the cyber criminals go to, is absolutely. Because they're easy. Cyber criminals are looking for the easiest target.
Yeah, I don't want to go take the guy's wallet that knows jujitsu. I want to take the little old lady's wallet that's easy to run away from.
So,
right?
and that's what we see with small businesses, is they don't have the funding and staff to put good programs like this in place, and so they're easy targets.
So what do you say to a small business like that doesn't have a lot of funding? Like, what are the options for them?
So again, we start with how can we help, right?
Yeah.
In typically, I said earlier, for us that starts with an assessment, in coming in and trying to figure out where are you at now, and then prioritizing your risks and determining how which ones are the highest priority for you that we can make the biggest difference, and then we start to work down that list. At CatchMark, we provide services again with the assessment. We also provide services where we establish programs.
Yeah.
If you do that, we can provide consulting services where we're going to help you manage your program and from the ground up. And then on the back end of all this, we also provide operational support.
Awesome. So would it be fair to say, or am I okay to say, if you subscribe to our YouTube channel and comment, that we would likely do a cybersecurity assessment for free for a business?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you're listening out there, subscribe, comment, and Brian will come out and run through a cybersecurity assessment and kind of let you know where you're at. We're kind of wrapping up on our time, Brian. I'm going to let you guys know, and I did this in my first intro where I had no sound. Brian was really nervous. How do you think it went, Brian?
No, it was fine. It was cold in this room. We got the heater going.
I'm hot now. That thing's been cooking for a while.
I've got it sitting at my feet.
Brian's got that thing like underneath him. It's probably melting the chair down there, but not so bad.
Yeah, no.
I think this went great. We're going to be back on weekly?
No, it's
bi-weekly.
Monthly.
Once a month.
Yeah, once a month.
We're going to be on once a month, and we're going to have different topics for you guys, just to discuss, different things in cybersecurity and, tips and tricks and things that you can implement for your business. And I'm Brent Raeth. I'm here with Brian Sibary, and I just want to say thank you for listening. Yeah. And we'll be back next month with some new tips. So, Brian, any last words?
No, that's it. It's a good time.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you next month.